The cameras flash, the crowd cheers, but Prince William says nothing, not a single word, no statement, no interview, no explanation, and yet his silence is deafening. In a world where every royal move is dissected, debated, devoured by the media, his inaction is the loudest action of all. Because while headlines swirl about family fractures, media manipulation, and sudden health crises, William is choosing not to play the game. But here's the twist: while the world expected a quiet, grieving air, William is spotted at Wimbledon smiling, composed, public. Yet just days earlier, a secret meeting reportedly took place in London. No cameras, no crowds, just whispers. So what's really going on? Why now? Why the silence? Why the carefully chosen moments of visibility? And perhaps most hauntingly, what message is being sent without a single word spoken? When you say nothing at all, but the whole world hears it. This isn't just about tennis, or titles, or tabloid tension. This is a royal standoff no one expected, but somehow, we all feel it, and it's only just begun. To understand the silence, we need to understand the storm that came before it. Because this moment, it didn't happen overnight. It's been building, year after year, across oceans, interviews, memoirs, and broken bonds that once seemed unbreakable. It began with Megxit, when Prince Harry and Meghan Markle made the explosive decision to step back from royal duties in 2020. It was more than a headline, it was a fracture in the very foundation of the monarchy. Then came the interviews, the Netflix documentaries, and of course, Spare. Harry and Meghan didn't just step away from the royal family, they spoke out, loudly, painfully, publicly. From allegations of racism within the palace walls, to the heartbreak of mental health struggles ignored, to Harry's own raw confessions about grief, war, and the cold machinery of the firm, their campaign wasn't subtle. It was emotional, strategic, and deeply polarizing. And through it all, William and Catherine remained silent. No public rebuttals, no fiery counter-interviews, no best-selling books. Instead, quiet diplomacy, official duties, smiling walkabouts, focused charity work. And yet every public appearance from the Prince and Princess of Wales became loaded with meaning, because while Harry was telling the world his version of the truth, William wasn't telling anything. But make no mistake, this wasn't passivity, this was strategy. Because in the reshaped royal hierarchy, roles have never been clearer. King Charles now wears the crown. William, the first in line, is no longer just the dutiful son, he's the future. And Harry, the spare, living in California, watching from afar. So when the silence breaks, or when it doesn't, it matters, because everything is different now. And every move is scrutinized. This isn't just family, it's power. It's the monarchy rebranding itself in real time, under the weight of global scrutiny and personal grief. And for William, the man who once walked behind his mother's coffin with the world watching, the line between duty and emotion has never been thinner. So what happens when the quiet one finally becomes the one we're all watching? Two young boys, dressed in matching navy suits, walking side by side behind their mother's coffin. The cameras caught their solemn faces, but behind those eyes was grief no child should ever carry. William and Harry didn't just lose a mother. They lost their anchor, their warmth, their protection from the cold machinery of the crown. And in that loss, they became closer than ever. For years, it was William and Harry, never one without the other. From boarding school mischief to military training to royal engagements, the brothers were seen as a unit, the future of the monarchy and the beating heart of Diana's legacy. But even then, the roles were being written. William, the golden boy, reserved, responsible, born for the throne. Harry, the wild card, cheeky, impulsive, the spare. And what began as playful contrast quietly evolved into something heavier, because while William was groomed for kingship, Harry was drifting, struggling, searching for purpose in an institution that didn't seem to have one for him. The turning point? It wasn't one moment, it was many. At William and Kate's wedding, Harry was the charming best man. But behind the scenes, he later admitted to feeling deeply alone. At Harry and Meghan's wedding, William stood beside him, but the warmth was missing. Rumors swirled of disagreements, tension, warnings. When their children were born, they sent congratulatory messages, polite, distant, formal. And when Prince Philip died, and later, Queen Elizabeth, we saw the brothers walk together again, just like they had in 1997, step for step, shoulder to shoulder. But this time, the distance between them was more than just physical. It was years of unspoken resentment, of different paths taken, of betrayal real or perceived. Because where William chose duty, Harry chose freedom. Where William protected the institution, Harry exposed it. And while Harry saw himself breaking cycles, William may have seen something else: disloyalty, chaos, a threat to the very thing he's been raised to uphold. What once was brotherhood became battle lines, and yet the pain still lingers beneath it all, because no matter how public their fallout has become, it began in private. In nurseries and palaces, in whispers and wounds, and in the eyes of two boys who once only had each other in a world that asked far too much, far too soon. So now, as men, one speaks to the world, the other remains silent, but neither has truly let go. It happened quietly. No flashing bulbs, no red carpets, no royal wave, just a private meeting in London behind closed doors between representatives of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle and Key Palisades. A meeting that wasn't supposed to happen, one that wasn't publicly confirmed, one that, for all intents and purposes, didn't exist, at least officially. But whispers have a way of escaping even the tightest royal walls, and this one was different, because it wasn't just about logistics or protocol or polite pleasantries. This was about possibility, about reconciliation, or perhaps negotiation. Was it a peace offering? A soft re-entry for the Sussexes into the royal fold? A conversation about King Charles's health? Or Harry's growing isolation from the family? The details are still murky, intentionally murky. But here's what we do know: William wasn't there. He wasn't briefed. He didn't send an aide. He didn't comment. No statements, no sightings, no signals, just silence. And then, almost like clockwork, the very next day, the world saw her, Catherine, Princess of Wales, radiant and smiling at Wimbledon. Her first major public appearance since her cancer diagnosis. Confident, graceful, visible. She sat in the royal box, surrounded by applause. The image of strength and resilience. The timing couldn't have been more precise. A secret meeting behind closed doors, and then a strategic, very public return from the future queen. The message? The royal ship sails forward with or without certain passengers, and William's absence from both the negotiations and the narrative. That was no accident. Because when the palace doesn't comment, it's not because they don't have anything to say, it's because they've already said it in the way that matters most to them, symbolically. And the silence, it's not passive, it's powerful. Sources close to the palace have begun to leak what many suspected for months: that Prince William has shut the door on his brother, firmly, perhaps for good. This isn't just a pause, it's a pivot. Insiders say William sees no path forward, not until trust is rebuilt, not until public attacks stop, not until loyalty is proven again. But from his perspective, that trust was shattered long ago. And now, with his wife recovering, his father's health uncertain, and the future of the crown resting on his shoulders, William is focused inward, on duty, on legacy, on survival. Not drama, not disruption, not reconciliation. And here's where it gets colder. In royal circles, silence isn't a void, it's a weapon. Silence isolates, silence shames, silence strategic, silence declares who's in and who's very much out. By saying nothing about Harry's visit, William didn't just decline to meet, he declined to engage. No acknowledgement, no conflict, no closure. Because in a monarchy built on appearances, sometimes the absence of one is the clearest message of all. And right now, William isn't just avoiding the drama, he's rising above it, or at least trying to. But in doing so, he's drawn an invisible line between the future and the past, between the heir and the spare. And no matter how many secret meetings take place behind palace gates, that line isn't fading, it's hardening. It didn't start with silence. In the early days, there were still phone calls, texts, late-night messages, before the Oprah interview, before the Netflix cameras, before Spare hit the shelves. William tried. Behind palace doors, there were private conversations, offers to meet, quiet efforts to understand. Because at the heart of it all, William wasn't just the future king, he was a brother. And no matter how deep the rift, blood still pulled at him. He didn't want headlines, he wanted honesty. But honesty, at least Harry's version of it, came with a cost. The interview with Oprah was the first blow. Watching his brother and Meghan sit beneath a California tree, revealing deeply personal family dynamics to millions was more than shocking. It felt like betrayal. Then came the docuseries, the staged shots, the orchestration, every carefully edited scene painting the institution and by extension, William as cold, cruel, complicit. Still, he remained silent. Still, he hoped, but spare was the line, because in those pages it wasn't just the firm that was attacked. It was him, fights detailed, private conversations laid bare, the physical altercation in Nottingham Cottage, the accusations that William had sided with the press, that he had failed his own brother when it mattered most, and for William, something shifted, not out of rage, but out of resolve. There comes a moment when emotion becomes policy, when heartbreak hardens into strategy, and that was his moment. No more private attempts. No more walking on eggshells. No more hope that the damage could be undone, because William stopped seeing Harry as just a brother and started seeing him as a liability, a threat to the future crown, to the stability of the monarchy, to the dignity that he and Catherine had worked so carefully to preserve. And speaking of Catherine, her role in this turning point can't be understated. She is the silent architect of so much royal image management, graceful, measured, incredibly media-aware. Catherine knows that visibility is power, but timing is everything. And where Meghan has often used media moments to amplify conflict, Catherine has used them to disarm it. Her appearance at Wimbledon, not just symbolic, it was strategic, a reminder that resilience doesn't always need a microphone, that sometimes dignity whispers louder than drama screams. It's no coincidence that as Harry and Meghan ramped up their campaigns, William and Catherine ramped down theirs, choosing consistency over chaos, presence over press, and slowly, William began to evolve. No longer just the hurt brother wounded and bewildered by his siblings' choices, but the heir, the stabilizer, the man who will one day wear the crown. And with that shift came the boundaries. He wouldn't engage in a media war. He wouldn't counter every accusation. He wouldn't make a spectacle out of grief. Instead, he would lead, not emotionally, but institutionally. That's the real climax here. Not a shouting match, not a public reunion, but a quiet transformation. William didn't retaliate. He redefined the royal response, redefined what strength looks like, and in doing so, he drew on. Now we see the ripple, because in the aftermath of silence a new order begins to form. For Prince William, the decision not to speak has become the statement in itself, and strangely it's working. His public image is soaring, not because he's suddenly charismatic or controversial, but because he's stable, predictable, reassuring. In a world obsessed with hot takes and oversharing, William's restraint reads like integrity, while others tell their truth. He protects his role, and to many, that's the very definition of leadership. Polls show it, headlines reinforce it, royal watchers quietly agree. William has emerged not just as the heir but as the symbol of the monarchy's survival. And across the Atlantic, the contrast couldn't be sharper. For Harry and Meghan, the emotional capital they once held, the sympathy, the intrigue, the rebellious charm is running thin. Their story hasn't changed, but the world around it has. The memoir has been read, the docuseries has been watched, the interviews have been parsed, and now, the public wants more than pain. They want purpose, vision, stability, and when they look to the Sussexes, they're not always sure they see it. Once framed as brave whistleblowers, Harry and Meghan are increasingly seen as outsiders, self-exiled. Yes, but now permanently so. The door they once insisted was closed on them now appears closed by them, or, worse, slammed shut by William. And that too was no accident, because in palace corridors, silence is not just survival, it's strategy. Every time William refuses to respond, he shifts the balance of power. He doesn't take the bait. He doesn't correct the record. He doesn't need to, because the silence itself becomes the strategy, a kind of calm defiance that says, we don't explain, we endure, and people notice. Former aides have called it classic Windsor, but more refined. Royal commentators call it modern monarchy 2.0, and insiders? They say William's resolve is now guiding the palace's entire media strategy. Because if the past few years have taught the royal family anything, it's that engaging the drama only feeds it. Silence, on the other hand, starves it, and that silence is beginning to isolate Harry and Meghan even further from family, from function, from relevance, which brings us to the king. Charles once the central figure, the monarch, the father is now caught in a quiet crisis. He loves both sons. That's never been in question. But in the architecture of monarchy, love doesn't always lead the design. Loyalty does, and increasingly, loyalty is defined by discretion. By showing up, staying quiet, playing the long game, and so, Charles facing his own health battles, navigating a fragile commonwealth, and preparing the next generation has little choice. He cannot mediate, he cannot mend, he must choose, and all signs point to William, because William represents continuity, control, the crown. Harry, he represents a chapter the monarchy is ready to close, and so, one son stands in the light. Composite. This isn't a feud. It's a message, not shouted, not broadcasted, whispered through absence, through distance, through silence, because sometimes, silence is the only language royalty has left. It's easy to look at the surface and see two estranged brothers, one hurt, one hardened, one speaking his truth, the other holding his tongue. But beneath the public moments, the documentaries, the interviews, the handshakes and smiles lies something far more chilling. This may not be a phase. This may be final. Have they crossed a line that can't be uncrossed? Did the memoirs and accusations push William beyond the point of return? Or did the silence itself, the cold, strategic withdrawal, become its own kind of punishment? Is this what happens when one brother chooses freedom and the other chooses the throne? Because here's the truth no one wants to say out loud. The royal family isn't really a family anymore. It's a chessboard. Every move is planned. Every piece has purpose. And in this game, emotion is a liability. So while Harry plays with passion, William plays for power. He doesn't react. He recalculates. He doesn't counter. He endures. And that's what makes this so hard to watch. Because if this were just a brotherly argument, we could hope for a hug, a phone call, a reunion. But this is structural, generational, institutional. It's not just about William and Harry. It's about monarchy vs. modernity, control vs. chaos, silence vs. exposure. And right now, silence is winning. William isn't just setting boundaries, he's setting precedent. By saying nothing, he has said everything. There is no more room. Not now, not like this. He's not being cruel, he's being calculated. Because one day, he'll be king, and kings don't feud, they filter, they forget, they forbid. So where does that leave Harry? Adrift, separate, still speaking but no longer being answered. And Meghan? Visible, but not present. This isn't just a personal split, it's a royal exile, one without titles, or banishment, or dramatic proclamations, just silence. And what if that's the most devastating exile of all? No confrontation, no closure, just a long, quiet vanishing. So the question lingers heavier than any headline. What if the message wasn't go away, but you're already gone?